What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of After the Whistle. Week 11 is in the books, and we're here to talk about it. Had a lot of crazy things happen this past weekend in college football. Couple top 10 teams escaped disaster. Iowa and Oregon. We're going to talk about that game. Also talk about Indiana escaping disaster in Happy Valley against Penn State. Talk about why Penn State should have won that game. And we'll talk about that here in just a few minutes. First, I'd like to say welcome back to the show. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. If it's your 54th time, I believe this is the 54th episode of the show. If it's your 54th time, thank you for tuning in to all 54 episodes. We appreciate you as well. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube is where the show is available. Be sure to check it out, like, and subscribe the channel. Can't stress that enough, guys. If you want to listen to the podcast on YouTube, please like and subscribe, and it helps me with the metrics. If you're on Spotify, be sure to follow the show. It'll automatically download the show every week when a new twice a week when new episodes are released. It'll automatically download. So be sure to like and subscribe the channel on YouTube. Be sure to follow on Spotify. It's the best way to make sure that you keep seeing the new episodes appear. So, jumping right into things. So, we're going to have a new top 12 tomorrow night. It's going to be released, the College Football Playoff Top 12, the second edition, I guess is what we could call it, will be released tomorrow night. And not much, I feel, is going to change, even though there's a few things that I would change. And we got into that a little bit last week on the show. Got into, a little bit of not a back and forth, not a debate, but got into a little bit of what I think the committee should be looking for. There's some certain teams that I don't feel like belong as high as they are, things of that nature. So we're going to get into, this is what I think the top 12 is going to look like tomorrow night when it's revealed. We'll start at number 12. I think BYU, I feel like they're going to fall all the way back to 12th. I still think that this BYU team is, I still think they're good. I don't think they're national championship good here. So don't twist my words. Don't get me wrong. I don't think this BYU team is national championship good. However, I think that given their track record so far this year, that they should fall back, 5 spots to number 12. Number 11, I feel like Oklahoma will be there in that 11th spot. Texas will be 10th. Notre Dame will be 9th. Oregon 8th. Texas Tech 7th. Ole Miss at 6, Georgia 5, Bama 4, Texas A&M 3, Indiana 2, Ohio State 1. Essentially, I think what's going to happen, BYU falls out of that and everybody slides up. That's what I think it's going to look like. I think BYU is going to be, or not what I think, that's what I'm pretty positive this is going to look like tomorrow night when it is revealed. Now, to contrast that, this is how I feel it should look. And we'll start at number 12. I've got Georgia Tech at number 12 in my CFP poll, or CFP rankings, whatever you want to call it. I've got Georgia Tech at 12. You can't really, Georgia Tech, the loss they had, NC State, bad loss, but there's been some really good teams that have been caught in that spot on the road against an upset-hungry team over the years. So there's been a lot of, issues that we've seen in college football over the years where a team gets knocked off like that. I'm not really buying into the loss that much. I mean, I am. Obviously, it's a loss. But I've still got Georgia Tech at 12. I think this team is fully capable of playing some solid football. I think that if you put Georgia Tech at 12, if they shouldn't be there, it'll all work out. They got a trip to, not a trip. They're going to be playing in Atlanta and Mercedes-Benz here in a couple weeks against the Georgia Bulldogs. So they're going to have a few tests down the road. It'll all come out in the wash if Georgia Tech doesn't belong there. I don't feel like they have played their way out of that top 12. Therefore, I have them sitting at 12. Number 11, I've got the BYU Cougars at number 11. I've only got them dropping 4 spots in my rankings. And the reason is in my opinion, they lost to one of the best teams in the country. Texas Tech, like I said last week, That is the best defense in the country, statistically, and I think you saw it in action on Saturday as well. Very good defense. Baron Morton, a lot rides on Baron Morton and his ability to stay healthy, because that team, that offense, we saw them just clicking along on offense. And so that big key piece for them, Baron Morton stays healthy. That defense, solid. So a loss to Texas Tech, in my opinion, should not drop BYU out of that top 12. I have seen some people that just because of the loss to Texas Tech, they're dropping BYU out of the top 12. They're putting BYU at 13, 14, 15. That is ludicrous. I don't agree with that whatsoever. At number 10, I've got Oklahoma. Number 9, got Texas. Yes, I know, the Texas that has 2 losses. Think about who they lost to. Now, I get it. The Ohio State spot, tough. Tough for Arch. But then the other loss, not, one we really want to forget about, Texas fans. Am I right? Really don't want to relive that. Really don't want to talk about it. But it's something we do have to talk about. However, the trajectory, if the committee is going to, if the committee's going to take trajectory into account, I guess we can hear it after the whistle as well, right? Because Texas's trajectory over the last few weeks, to me, they look really good. And here they are, going to be, playing Georgia this upcoming Saturday. We'll get into that in the prediction show. Don't want to show my cards too much on that one. But, Texas with their, with them beating Oklahoma, I feel like kind of is a little bit of a, not redemption, but it kind of does. Kind of redeems them from the loss to Florida, even though that was an ugly loss. In the swamp, tough place to play, regardless of how terrible Florida is this year. But Texas, to me, at number 9. Oregon at number 8. This team finally, the thing about it is the question going into this weekend against Iowa was, can Oregon find a way to win? They found a way to win. I think that says a lot for Dan Lanning's team, so I have them at 8. Ole Miss at 7. I'm going to put Ole Miss there at 7. Texas Tech. There is an argument here. After watching this Texas Tech team, there is an argument for them to be in the top 5. There really is. You can make the argument that they should be there, but I'm not ready to put them over the 5th-ranked team. But they're definitely, with every passing week, I feel like they get better, which is scary because they're already good. But 6, Texas Tech. 5, Georgia. Georgia finally kind of, I feel like came into their own a little bit this past weekend against Mississippi State. It's the most complete game Georgia's played all year. That Georgia team can be a problem for some other teams down the stretch. 4, I've got Alabama. Ty Simpson, that offense. The fact that their receiving core, now Alabama is 100% healthy with Brooks, with Horton, Williams, Bernard. Bama's going to be a problem. They already are, but they're going to continue to be a problem. The defense looks like it's getting better and better every week as well. At number 3, I've got the Indiana Hoosiers. Yes, I know the Indiana that's ranked number 2, that's probably going to be ranked number 2 in the committee's rankings tomorrow night. However, I saw some things against Penn State that I don't like, and we'll talk about that when we recap the games here in a few minutes. But Indiana at 3. Texas A&M. I've got Texas A&M at number 2, the 2nd-ranked team in the country. Dominant performance again. A lot of people were talking about Mizzou could pull the upset there in Columbia. Didn't happen. Texas A&M was in firm control of that football game from start to finish, essentially. There for a minute, Mizzou showed some fight, but once Texas A&M took control, they just strangled the life out of every team that they play. And so I've got Texas A&M at number 2 in my rankings. The number 1 team in the country, Ohio State. I don't think there's any argument there. I don't think there's anything that needs to be said. They are by far and away the most talented team in the country. They've looked the best up to this point. And so, don't see any reason why anybody should be ranked ahead of Ohio State at this very present moment. So, I'm going to ball that up. Paper toss. Out of here with that. Let's move on to something else. Let's move on to a talking point that I have seen over the last few weeks. And I think we saw this talking point kind of play out, and I think we got some answers this past Saturday to this talking point. I've seen on certain podcasts people making an argument that there's not a whole lot of separation at the top of the Big Ten between Ohio State and Indiana. And a big talking point here, everybody said, well, Indiana can beat Ohio State. I'm not arguing the point that Indiana could beat Ohio State. They 100% could. They've got the talent. They've got the playmakers. They've got the defense. However, I think we saw this past Saturday, there is I wouldn't say a crystal clear separation, but there's clear separation between Ohio State and Indiana. I don't think right now, if they played this upcoming Saturday, I think I'll get into it more in a minute when we recap the Indiana-Penn State game. I think there's some concerns for me as far as Indiana. If they were to play a team like Ohio State, say this upcoming Saturday, I would Ohio State could be favored by 9.5, and I would definitely I'd take Ohio State and I'd take the points because Ohio State far and away the best. I think there is a separation. Now, it's not a big gap of separation between Indiana and Ohio State, but I think there is some separation there at the top of the Big Ten. I know that's been a hot button issue. That's been a hot topic on some podcasts. I think we can finally say with full confidence after this past weekend, you could 100% make that argument. Another talking point that I would like to talk about before we get into the recap of Saturday's action is, can the SEC get 4 teams in the playoff? Or 5 teams? I've seen some arguments for 5 teams. So let's talk about it right now. So right now, as it sits, you've got Oklahoma, Texas, you've got Georgia, you've got Bama, you've got Ole Miss, you've got Texas A&M. You've got a lot of SEC teams there inside of that top 12. Now the question is, it looks at this very moment, Texas A&M got Texas to end the season, could be a little bit of a test for them. Alabama has, Oklahoma and Auburn. So they've got their test in Oklahoma, then they play Eastern Illinois, their little cupcake game on around Thanksgiving, and then they have Auburn in Jordan-Hare. I feel like Bama only has one test left on their schedule, and that's Oklahoma, and they've got them in Bryant-Denny Stadium. So Alabama gets past Oklahoma. I feel like they're on a smooth path to the SEC championship. Likewise, Texas A&M, as I just mentioned, they've got South Carolina coming to town. Then they play Samford, and then they go on the road to Austin to play Texas to end the season. The game that they need to pay attention to is that game at the end of the season against Texas. Other than that, I feel 100% confident that we're looking to see Texas A&M and Alabama in Atlanta for the SEC championship in early December. That being said, if those teams are on a collision course, those teams are going to be ranked up there 3rd, 4th, right in that general area at the time of that game. I feel like if Georgia keeps winning, that's 3. Ole Miss, to close out their season, has got Florida in Oxford and Mississippi State in Starkville. I feel like Ole Miss wins those 2 games. There's 4. Now you move to Oklahoma and Texas. Those are the outliers. Can Texas make the college football playoff? Here's what I'll say to that. Texas, with 2 opportunities on their schedule out of their last 3 games to prove they belong there. The only chance that Texas and Oklahoma get into the playoff is they're going to have 3 losses. One of the 2 of them. Does Texas beat Georgia in Athens, or does Texas beat A&M? If Georgia beats Texas in a close game, say a field goal, and then turns around a couple weeks later, and let's say Texas beats A&M, where are they ranked? That's a big question. And the question would be, if Georgia does beat Texas, how far do they fall? And how many spots could they potentially jump when they beat A&M? I feel like if you look at it as a way would those 2 offset each other? So if a loss to Georgia but a win to Texas A&M would essentially offset each other, kind of like offsetting penalties in football. Say Texas falls 4 spots if they lose to Georgia, but say they gain 4 spots if they beat A&M. Could they potentially make an argument for the playoff? As of right now, I think a 5th team in the college football playoff for the SEC is a far-fetched, idea. I think the committee's made it very clear over the last few years, 3-loss teams, pretty much that 3rd loss is an automatic disqualifier. I would have to say, as of right now, I think the SEC gets 4 teams. I don't see a 5th team from the Southeastern Conference in the college football playoff as of right now. Because like I said, I feel like Texas still has 1 loss on their schedule, and I feel like Oklahoma still has 1 loss on their schedule. Now, one of those teams wins out, then you have a 10-2. Then you start to think maybe, but other than that, I don't really know. Right now, I would bank on the fact, like if I would bet, if the SEC, playoff teams the line was at 4.5 teams, I would bet the under at this very moment. Right now, I just don't see a 5th team getting in there. All right, so recapping this weekend's action. First, we're going to start kind of where we started on the prediction show. We're going to go in that same order and had 8 games that we talked about on the prediction show last week. The first one being Florida State going to Clemson. All I can say about this football game is gross, because this game was, for one, boring. 2, the decision to keep Mike Norvell in Tallahassee. And I know the word had been spoken that they were going to reassess their football program after the season and, all of this. Here's the thing. If Mike Norvell coached in the SEC, he'd be fired by now. I would make the argument that if Mike Norvell coached in the SEC, he would have been fired last year. 2-10 with that kind of, at that school, essentially. Because, you could go 2-10 at Syracuse. You could go 2-10 at Duke, or, not one of the premier schools of the ACC. Just like in the SEC, Kentucky could go 2-10. They'd probably keep their coach around for an extra year, Mississippi State kept Jeff Lebby after last year going 2-10. So those are kind of those bottom tier schools in the conference. But this is Florida State here. 2-10 should be, I feel like Norvell should have been fired at the end of last season. But to keep him another year, give him another shot, you start off this year, you beat Alabama, and here you're sitting after the Clemson game 4-5. And you're fighting for bowl eligibility at this point. And Norvell, let's not get it twisted and act like Norvell has had this great amount of success at Florida State. He hasn't. He had the one good year. And I allude to this point all the time with Florida State, with Mike Norvell every single year is betting it all on black in the transfer portal. And he's hit only once. He's been there, 4 years? He's hit 1 time with transfer portal additions. Mike Norvell was at the Wintersville Classic a couple weeks ago. The Lowndes High School, Valdosta High School game. If you know anything about football in South Georgia area, you've heard of this football game. He was there. What's he doing there? I think my After the Whistle Facebook page, I commented on a post of him standing on the sideline at that football game, and I thought, what's he doing here? I commented, I was like, what's he doing here? He doesn't get high school players. And I had a guy comment, I cannot remember his name or I'd shout him out, but I had a guy comment on my comment and he goes, Knowles fan here, I 100% endorse this statement. And I commented back to that guy and I said, that's Norvell's problem. And the guy said, couldn't agree more. So Florida State fans, I know this is exhausting for you. Trust me. Everybody knows I'm a Georgia fan. I haven't seen a 2-10 Georgia season in my lifetime. But The thing is, 2-10 at Florida State's inexcusable. Something's got to give with Mike Norvell, and now you get beat by a horrible Clemson team. Like, Clemson's not good at all. This team fooled everybody. Before the season, we thought, Cade Klubnik, Bryant Wesco, Peter Woods, this team, these athletes, offense, defense was going to be really good this year. This was going to be one of the best rosters that Dabo's had in the last 4 or 5 years. They fooled everybody. Clemson also fighting for bowl eligibility. And when you allow, Florida State, 2 turnovers, killed you. But Clemson possesses the ball because of your 2 turnovers for 34 minutes of this football game, just absolutely smothered you. Now, yes, Florida State, offensively, 360 yards, 250 passing, 110 rushing, 4 yards a carry. Like, sounds great, right? Turning the football over and the penalties, untimely penalties, killed you. And so I'm not saying that I am saying Norvell needs to go. I think he needs to go now. I was expecting, I'm expecting to hear that he's been fired. A couple weeks ago, there was some rumblings about it. Nothing came to fruition. Here we are 2 weeks later. Florida State still looks just as bad. I hate it for Florida State fans. Really, I do. Like, it's not a great spot to be in. But, the coaching strategy for Mike Norvell to get players is not good. And, the only shining spot on Saturday against Clemson's Deuce Robinson. I mean, that's by far and away your best athlete on offense. I mean, he had 9 catches for 124 yards. You waste a performance like that. You have 2 turnovers. You fumbled. Castellanos had 1 fumble. He also threw 1 interception. Like, you can't do that and try to beat. I know I picked Florida State to beat Clemson. I had Florida State winning this game 30-27. But obviously didn't come close. So Florida State, something's got to be done about Mike Norvell. All right, so Northwestern and USC. And I know this was a game that I felt like a lot of people were like, why is he even talking about this? USC ends up blowing the doors off of Northwestern. I thought, however, I picked USC to win this one 31-20, so not far off on the score prediction here. I felt like it was a weird spot. Now, I had some people saying, oh, gosh, like, Colby's picking USC to get upset. No, I'm not. Like, I felt like the line was a little bit crazy though. USC 14.5. I wasn't crazy about USC covering in this spot. They came close, but 11-point win for USC. Jaden Mayava looks great, and excuse me. Jaden Mayava looks great. Offense, obviously, still clicking. Nearly 500 yards again for Lincoln Riley's offense. They run the football really well against this Northwestern defense. 173 yards on 30 carries. They were very disciplined. Didn't have many penalties. I think they had 3 or 4 penalties. Held the ball for about 33 minutes. And they were just in rhythm. Very good on third down. Northwestern didn't really... They had 2 turnovers. I mean, they had 2 fumbles. But the issue that I'll say going into this football game was Northwestern's not penalized much. They don't give a lot of free yardage. They only had 2 penalties in the whole game. But I also said pay close attention to USC's big 3, Wayman Jordan, Jaden Mayava, Mekhi Lemon. So Mayava goes 24-33 for 299 yards. Also added 10 yards carrying as well. And then you have Mekhi Lemon, just 11 catches, 161 yards, a touchdown, 14.6 average, yards per catch. Just, this is a guy, one of the most underrated receivers in college football. Like, everybody wants to talk about Surratt, Cooper, Smith, Tate, Williams, Bernard. Lemon needs to be in that conversation. Life gives you lemons. Things are pretty good there at Southern Cal, as long as you got an athlete like that on the outside. USC, big win in the Big Ten. USC, hey, what's their chances, to get into this playoff? If they win out, what do we think? Do the Trojans get in if they go 10-2? do they get in? I think, they got a contest against Iowa. Iowa's proven to be a tough out. They got them in the Coliseum. Then they go on the road to Autzen to play Oregon. So they got that as well. And then they got UCLA to finish the season. So to me, if USC wins those two games, Iowa and Oregon, they're in 100%. 9-3 USC's not there. They're not making it. Win out, beat those two teams, get 2 ranked wins out of your last 3 contests. I feel like you're there by far. Like not even a conversation. All right, so moving over to some American Athletic Conference action. We had Tulane and Memphis in this contest. Really shocking to me how quickly Tulane just jumped all over Memphis. I mean, this game was 35-17 at halftime. Final score ends up being 38-32, but 35-17 at halftime. Tulane come out clicking on offense, just looked really good. Jake Retzlaff, heck of a game from him. 16-23, 332 yards, 3 touchdowns. His QBR was 95.4, just a dynamite game for him. Really hasn't played, I would argue, his best game of the season against Memphis when he needed to. That's when he needed to play his best football, was against Memphis, and he did. So the question now is, does this eliminate Memphis from that Group of 5 playoff spot discussion? I think it does, because I thought they had a chance. They win this football game. They go on their last 2 games against East Carolina and Navy. I feel like those are very winnable games for them. I feel like Memphis finishes at 11-1. I think they're there. A 10-2 Memphis, I don't think so, because you do have some teams out there that, one, have better record. You have James Madison. You have some other teams out there that I feel like are going to be vying for that Group of 5 spot. I think this eliminates Memphis. Plus a loss to Tulane. Tulane's looked good at times throughout the season, but Tulane with the loss to UT San Antonio, and then, they had the loss to Ole Miss, which in the Group of 5 sense, they're supposed to lose to Ole Miss. But the loss to UTSA, a team that's going to be barely fighting for a 500 record, not a good look for Tulane. And then Tulane turns around and beats Memphis on the road. Memphis losing at home, I think this is a disqualifying loss for them as well. The inability for Brendan Lewis to run the football, the quarterback run has been a very, very big staple in this Memphis offense this year. Threw the ball well. 29-34 for 317, 2 touchdowns, had an interception, but the inability for him to run the football. Memphis or Tulane got after him. And so, to me, they sacked him 7 times. 6, 7. I can't remember, but they got after him. That you could tell that was clearly the defensive game plan for Tulane, was to get after the quarterback. They did. And his inability to run the football is kind of what cost Memphis this game. And that's what won the game for Tulane, was getting pressure on Lewis, making sure make him a pocket passer. Now, he didn't do bad, 29-34 for 317, like I said. Not bad in the pocket, but I feel like when he's able to just run around, create, get vertical, that's when Memphis is dangerous. Tulane, incredible game planning there. John Summerall and his staff game planned a heck of a football game here. And it's, it puts Tulane in a little bit of that discussion. But like I said, the loss to UTSA, I don't know. A lot of chips would have to fall in Tulane's favor for them to be considered, I think, for that Group of 5 bid going into the college football playoff. But hey, crazier things have happened. It is college football. Crazy things happen all the time. All right, moving on to Starkville, Mississippi. And I mentioned it briefly at the start of the show when we talked about this, but this was the most complete game we have seen Georgia play on offense and defense this year. You know, the gripes around Georgia has been, oh, well, the defense spots teams too many points. You can't spot a team 2 touchdowns. You can't spot a team 10 points. You know, you can't keep getting away with it. They spotted Mississippi State 7 points. And then after that, it was just a complete takeover. I mean, at that point, Georgia scored 38 unanswered points. And the 38 unanswered, you know, the offense was clicking. Gunnar Stockton looked great. But the biggest part of this game that I would like to highlight, circle, whatever you want to do, is keep an eye out for this UGA offensive line. They looked really good in their run scheme as far as blocking on Saturday against Mississippi State. It was a masterclass. Mike Bobo, in his bag play calling, looked great. Shout out to the Bobo haters. Still love y'all. But, you know, this Georgia team right here can beat anybody. They keep playing like that, they can beat anybody. I mean, 30 first downs, 7 of 12 on third down, 567 yards of total offense, 303 of that being on the ground, 264 through the air. And I said, I think we see Georgia start to figure some things out on the prediction show. I think we saw that. I also said I feel like they run for 200 plus. They hold the ball for 35 minutes. They ran the ball for 300 plus, and they held the ball for 33 minutes. That's the recipe moving forward for Georgia. This is what, you know, a lot of Georgia fans have been waiting to see this year, is just a performance to really just kind of establish, hey, we're still here. You can talk about Bama, you can talk about A&M, you can talk about Ohio State, you can talk about Indiana, but we're still here. And this was one of those games for Georgia where it's like a we're still here game. Looked great. You know, the area of concern, like I said in Thursday's prediction show, was Georgia's secondary. I think Georgia playing a lot of these pass-happy offenses and a lot of these really dynamic passing offenses early on in this football season really helped them against Mississippi State. 173 yards passing for a Mississippi State offense that up until this point in the season, you know, has averaged 250 a game. So held them under their average there. Mississippi State, you know, ran for 149 yards. Georgia held them under their average there. A team that's also scoring 33 points a game. They scored 21, 7 of that being kind of, I would call, garbage time. So Georgia had all their starters were out on defense, you know, everything else. So the starting unit for Georgia held this Mississippi State offense to 14 points. So really good football game for Georgia. You know, the big shout out to is going to be to Nate Frazier. 12 carries, 181 yards. Nate Frazier, I always forget when I watch this Georgia offense, it's almost like I always forget how fast he is and how shifty he is until I see him in the open field. I mean, can you imagine the feeling, the just absolute gut-wrenching feeling that a safety has to have when Nate Frazier gets through the first and second levels of your defense, and it's you, all that stands between him and the end zone is you. That's got to be nerve-wracking. So, you know, I always forget, like I said, until I see him break out in the open field, I forget, you know, how fast he really is. But heck of a performance from him. You know, really the Georgia unit as a whole on the ground. You know, Gunnar Stockton got in on the fun with 31 yards. Chauncey Bowens had a few good runs. Bo Walker, the freshman. We saw Dwight Phillips. We saw Dylan Bell on some jet sweeps. We saw Jeremy Bell. We saw Josh McCray. Like, everybody got in on the feast, so to speak, as far as running the football against this Mississippi State defense. And then Noah Thomas, Zachariah Branch was Zachariah Branch. He still had a solid game, eight catches, 68 yards. And then you had, you know, Noah Thomas as well, kind of his breakout game. You know, a lot of Georgia fans have been, where's Noah Thomas? Where's Noah Thomas? Kirby Smart's been asked that in press conferences this year so far. Where's Noah Thomas been? Well, he finally showed up, and he showed you his ability in the open field to get vertical, you know, with the touchdown that he scored. So Oscar Delp had a great day. London Humphreys had a big catch. That catch by Elias Williams. Y'all, Camden County kid, South Georgia. If you know Camden County, if you know South Georgia football. Elias Williams with a heck of a grab. And then I feel like we'll see an uptick in playing time for Elias Williams after this game, because when you look at the catch that he had and then you watch the play right after that, Georgia had a touchdown run right after that play. Watch the block that he threw on the outside linebacker for Mississippi State. That gets you more playing time from Kirby Smart. If you're Elias Williams, heck of an effort. You know, that's called being a team guy. That's called being a team player. You know, you had big catch. There's no ego involved in it. You had a big catch, and then you throw a phenomenal block right after that. That gets you more playing time, and that gets you more respect from guys like me, guys like Kirby Smart, and everything else when we look at that. So, all right, we're going to move over to some Big Ten because I don't want to get accused of being an SEC homer or whatever else, whatever that people would like to call me. So let's move over to a Big Ten contest. There was 2 Big Ten contests this weekend where teams survived, and we'll talk about the other one here in a few minutes. But the first one I'd like to talk about, Oregon playing at Iowa. This was a game, I mean, the weather was horrible, but there's no real excuse here in the weather. But you can make that excuse, well, the weather, whatever. Both teams had to play in it. You know, Oregon gets away 18-16, last-second field goal to beat Iowa. Iowa, man, had the upset. They had it just right. They had it right on the tip of their fingers, and they just let it slip away there at the end. But a lot can be said for, you know, I've seen some graphics like Iowa gave this game away. Iowa got soft on defense on that last drive by Oregon. No. That throw that Dante Moore made on that last drive to essentially put Oregon in the position to get another play or two off to get in field goal range, that throw, some great defense out there on the outside by Iowa's corner. So I'm not the one that's going to say Iowa gave this game away. No. That was a heck of a throw from Dante Moore to set that up. And an even better catch to set up that sequence of plays to kick that field goal with 3 seconds left and remain there, you know, firmly inside the top 10, keep their playoff hopes alive. I think we learned a lot about Oregon in this contest. I think what we saw from Oregon was, you know, they got the talent. You know, you talk about guys like Dante Moore, DeCorian Moore, you know, they've got the talent on this offense. But what we saw from Oregon was a team that is resilient. You know, we saw a team that can get it done when they need to. When the chips are down, when their back's against the wall, they're about to get upset on the road in Iowa, they just get after it. And there's something to be said for that. You know, I've said it on the show about a team like Georgia, and a team that has to constantly, you know, that's put in that position. It's all about how you respond. I feel like Oregon responded really well. Noah Whittington, heck of a game from him on the ground. 17 carries, 118 yards, 7 yards a carry. You know, great running football there. Dante Moore wasn't going to like light it up, you know, because of the weather. It wasn't really a pass happy, you know, the weather wasn't friendly to quarterback trying to pass the football, but made the plays when he needed to. I think I came away from this football game admiring Dante Moore and his ability to play the position more than I have when he's put up 300 yards and completed 75% of his passes this year, because of the fact that when he needed to make a play, he made it. And, you know, great win for Oregon. Moving on, a very stingy Iowa team that I feel like, and we'll talk about it, you know, we'll talk about this Iowa team later in the week on the prediction show, but an Iowa team that I feel like has still got the ability to wreck someone's season. And I'm not going to try to tip my hand too much there. Y'all might have already figured it out, and for that, I'm sorry if it's a spoiler alert, whatever. But this Iowa team could really play spoiler for some teams down the road, because this is a very physically tough Iowa team. They are a tough out. You go to play a football game against the Iowa Hawkeyes, get ready for a 12-round fist fight. I mean, this isn't an Ali fight where you can bounce around and play defense and dodge and this and that. This is a game you're going to have to stand in there in the pocket and trade. You're going to have to fight this team in a phone booth. That's Iowa. Kurt Ferris, that is notorious for physicality, and that's what you're going to get with Iowa. Ultimately, they come up short, but I think we learned a lot more from Iowa in this game than we have in games before. Oregon's just a better team. I felt like it was going to be a low-scoring affair given the weather. I had Oregon winning this one 23-20. I said, possibly a last-second field goal. That ended up happening. But I learned a lot about Iowa. We also learned a lot about Oregon. Both of these are really respective, good teams in the Big Ten. It's unfortunate that somebody had to lose this football game because it was really good. If you're like me and you like defense, very good game to watch, So the Texas A&M Aggies keep rolling. And going into this weekend, we heard some certain people, certain talking heads at ESPN, certain talking heads wherever, that this could be a potential, slip-up spot for the Aggies. End up beating Missouri 38-17. It just goes to show you, I even had this game a lot tighter. I had Texas A&M winning this one 27-24 in my prediction. So I felt like that Missouri would give A&M a little bit of a test, but that didn't happen. I mean, A&M looks as good as anybody in the country, putting up 464 yards on this Missouri defense. A Missouri defense that really top 10 in the country in almost every metric. Scoring, rush yards per game, pass yards per game, overall yards per game. We've seen Missouri top 5 in the country giving up yards, top 7th in the country in pass, top 10 in rushing. Like, they consistently hold rushers under 90 yards. A&M comes in here, runs the football for 243 yards. Passes it for 221, has 464 yards of total offense. 50% on third down. Biggest thing for Missouri, the turnovers killed them. That was Missouri was going to have to play about as clean of a football game as you could play to beat A&M. They were going to have to be good on third down. They were going to have to limit the turnovers or really not commit any turnovers, because this A&M football team's so good on offense, you cannot continue to give them extra possessions. You give them 2 extra possessions, they're more than likely going to score, going to establish some kind of separation. But, one quarterback nobody's talking about that much, Marcel Reed, steady as a rock. 20 of 29, 221 yards, 2 touchdowns, added 29 yards on the ground on 5 carries. Really didn't have to run the football that much. When you got a guy like Reuben Owens, 13 carries, 102 yards, averaged almost 8 yards a carry. When you got a guy like that running the football, takes a lot of the load off of Marcel Reed running. You use Marcel Reed kind of more or less as a running option that keeps a defense like Missouri, a very aggressive Missouri defense, it keeps them honest, because every time he puts that football in that running back's belly, there's a little bit of hesitation on the defensive side. And so therefore that, to me, plays more into Texas A&M and the style of football that they want to play. KC Concepcion, Mario Craver, obviously had, good games as well. They've been good all year. Concepcion, being the deep threat guy, had 4 catches for 84 yards. But the emergence of Ashton Bethel-Roman for Texas A&M could be a game changer. Now, he's played good so far to this year, but he's kind of been overshadowed in this offense by Concepcion and by Craver. But played a really good game, very fast, kind of that slot guy, can really he's a matchup nightmare in that position. He gets up to speed, he gets on that level. This is a 3-headed monster at A&M at the receiver position that could be hard to contend with for a lot of defenses out there. Missouri, though, I feel like the playoff Missouri hopes, they're done, which really didn't have a lot of hope in Missouri, just looking at what they had coming down before this game. You had to play A&M, you have to play Mississippi State, you had to play Oklahoma, and then you got Arkansas on the road to finish the football season. The only way Missouri was going to sniff the playoff was at 10-2. I knew that wasn't going to happen. I think they're an 8-4 football team, and I think this showed that there is a great deal of a talent gap between A&M and Missouri, and A&M gets a big win on the road, continues the march. Everybody keeps waiting for A&M to slip up. For a while there, I was a part of that group where I thought, hey, A&M, they've done this for the last few years. They did it last year. They started out hot, and then they faltered there towards the end of the football season. But doesn't look like Mike Elko and this squad's going to do it. So, all right, so LSU Bama. We'll spend a little bit of time on this, but this game was just domination by Alabama. I know you look at the final score, 20-9. We see the final score, and we think, this game could have been a lot better, but Garrett Nussmeier ultimately gets benched in this football game for Van Buren. Just not a good showing for LSU. This has been a story for them all year. Just can't seem to figure it out. Fired Brian Kelly. The program's in disarray right now. The question mark is around who's going to be coaching this. Who's going to be coaching this football team moving forward? I don't think anybody really knows that. There's a lot of speculation. I saw some speculation. I saw a message board that Nick Saban has a deal on the table for $20 million a year, to come back and coach LSU. Don't know that I would read into that too much. If I'm y'all, or if even me, I'm not reading into that too much. I think Nick Saban's perfectly happy doing what he's doing. I know everybody saw the video of him getting his birthday cake from Miss Terry, and looks pretty comfortable in that recliner watching football. Miss Terry comes in, puts a cake in his lap, he blows his candles out. It looks like he's living the life as a retiree. Don't think he's coming back to coach this program. So, have to find somebody to coach this football program because they're way too talented to be putting up 9 points. Way too talented. Now, we look at Alabama with, 344 yards. Still, the concern to me, and I mentioned it last week, and I will mention it again, and talking to Bama fans, it is 100% an area of concern for this Alabama offense is the inability to run the football. This is there's a lot of metrics out there that have Alabama, as the FPI favorite to win the national championship. I don't see it. If you can't run the football consistently, eventually you're going to run into a team that can control your pass game, that can put it in a box, put a bow on it, hand it off. And that's the Ohio State Buckeyes. If Alabama is ultimately on a collision course with Ohio State, like a lot of people think they are, got to figure some things out. You've got to be balanced on offense. You cannot sit there and just expect Ty Simpson to just win every football game. Yes, you got a great group of receivers. Brooks, Horton, Bernard, Williams. You got a great group of receivers there. But you can't sit here and expect to win football games being one-dimensional on offense. I mean, you had Daniel Hill, 7 carries, 21 yards. Jam Miller had 8 for 13. Ty Simpson added 4 for 8. That's not good. That's not Alabama football. And for me to believe that this team has a chance to win the national championship, they're going to have to start getting better, blocking up front, and running the football. And, the receivers, they're great. They're going to play their game. They're going to be good. It'd make them even better if you could run the football. Right now, you see a lot of teams scheming up for Alabama, running a lot of nickel packages, running a lot of 5 DBs on the field, light box, and you still can't run the football. That's an area of concern because if you can't run the football against a light box and you are Alabama, that's a problem. And it's going to rear its ugly head at some point. Ultimately, though, is Bama the third best team in the country? 100%. Like, no argument from me. No argument from me whatsoever. Third, fourth best team, whatever you want to call them. They're right there in the mix. They're firmly inside of that top 5, and they are definitely one of the best teams in college football. Now, the fact that I think that it's a problem they can't run the football, that is a shared concern with everyone in the media space and Bama fans included. I've talked to them. Definitely a problem when you can't run the football and you're one-dimensional on offense, especially when you start to go up against defenses that are a lot more dynamic. You know, you look at a team like let's just say a Texas A&M. You're going to play them in Atlanta. You know, a lot better defense than what you've been playing. You weren't able to run the football against worse defenses. Texas A&M makes you one-dimensional. That could be a problem. Likewise, if you're on a collision course with Ohio State, that defense, I mean, nobody can run the football on that defense, but one-dimensional offenses are not going to get it done. And so, to me, if there's any area of concern for Alabama, it's definitely that. Now, area of concern for LSU is everything. I mean, can't run the football, can't really pass the football very well, make a lot of mistakes, untimely penalties, don't have a coach, no sense of direction on offense. With the talent that LSU has on defense, though, it's really and really the talent on offense. I mean, don't get me wrong, the talent that you see, it's embarrassing that this team is now sitting here as we come into November at 5-4. You know, this is a team that I thought, and a lot of other people thought, that we would see them competing for a trip to Atlanta, you know, possibly competing for a trip in the college football playoff to go make a run, but not happening. But, you know, very disappointing season for LSU and the Bayou Bengals. All right, so the game of the week was BYU and Texas Tech, and man, it was a snoozer. Kind of played out how I thought. You know, BYU, I felt like they were, you know, a little fraudulent, but either way, I still think they're a good football team. I just think Texas Tech is that much better. And, you know, with the Texas Tech defense and how good that they are, you know, like I said last week, not a typical Big 12 defense, but the number one ranked rush defense in the country against BYU, who wants to run the football. Now, they want to pass the football as well, but they want to run the football. Bear Bachmeier just couldn't really get anything done. BYU as a whole really couldn't get anything done. I mean, L.J. Martin ran for 35 yards. Bachmeier had 11 carries for 12. Just really couldn't get anything going on the ground. I think 27 carries for 67 yards. You know, Bachmeier tried his best, had a couple shot plays down the field. You know, they had Parker Kingston had a 21-yard catch down the field. They were able to stretch it a little bit against Texas Tech. Other than that, though, couldn't really get in any kind of a rhythm on offense. You know, 255 total yards. You know, their average on the year was 318. Texas Tech held them under that. Third down was a big problem for BYU. 3 of 14 on third down. Could not extend drives. Couldn't convert. And that's mainly due to the fact that Texas Tech just kept them behind the sticks. You know, they weren't in a lot of – BYU's third downs weren't a lot of 3rd and 2s, 3rd and 3s, 3rd and 4s. They were a lot of 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, you know. And when you've got a defense as electric and as dangerous as Texas Tech is, you know, that is 100% an issue when you're backed into a situation where they know you have to pass it to convert the first down. And then Jacob Rodriguez as well, just another phenomenal game from him. 14 tackles, 9 solo tackles, had a tackle for loss. You know, just a great player there on that defense. But when you look at, you know, you've got guys like John Curry, Ben Roberts, Brendan Jordan, David Bailey, Romello Height. They've got just some dogs on that defense for Texas Tech. I mean, money, you can call it what you want, you know, spending the money. They've got a squad on defense for Texas Tech. That's why in my rankings, I would bump Texas Tech up a little bit. I'd put them in that 6th spot, like I said, in my edition of the rankings. I'd put them up there because I feel like with that defense, they can pretty much play with anybody that they've got. Remaining schedule for Texas Tech, you've got UCF and you've got West Virginia. Both games easily winnable for this football team. Should finish the season at 11-1. Should win the Big 12. And Texas Tech's going to be a problem when they get to the playoff. They're going to be a problem. They're going to be a tough out for really anybody. I mean, I think there's probably two teams that could handle Texas Tech really well, but other than that, they'd be a tough out for Alabama. They'd be a tough out for Georgia. They'd be a tough out for Ole Miss. I mean, now Ohio State and Texas Tech, I'd probably take Ohio State in the points, whatever the spread is on that one. But, Texas Tech really has established themselves into that category of national championship contender. I know. Y'all going to come at me hard at that one. But I said it. Call it a hot take, call it whatever you want, but I really do think that this Texas Tech team can make a run. It's all about the path that they draw when we get to those final rankings and we get to those very last playoff rankings before the postseason starts. I think that depends on how far Texas Tech goes into that playoff. All right, so first, I'm going to end the show by giving a shout-out to a very special group of people here. Tomorrow, November 11th, Veterans Day here in the United States. I'd like to give a shout-out to all the veterans out there. I know I've got some members of my family that are veterans, both, whether it be the Army, whether it be the Marine Corps, whether it be the Navy, whether it be the Air Force. I just wanted to say, appreciate your service, as always. The only reason that we are able to enjoy a sport such as so great as college football on the weekends is due to the freedom that we enjoy because of men and women like you that were willing to put your lives on the line and put country above everything else and serve our nation. And I appreciate that. I know everybody else appreciates that wholeheartedly. And we will never be able to express the gratitude and the appreciation that we have as a nation for men and women that are willing to put their lives on the line for our country, as I said before. So we hope the veterans out there, if you get a day off from work, if you're, in a job if you're a retired veteran, hey, enjoy your day. But, if you are a veteran and you are, enjoying the day off from a job that is not in the military space, enjoy your day off and know that After the Whistle appreciates the heck out of you. So, Thursday, prediction show, another big weekend coming up in college football. Week 12 got some marquee matchups, some matchups that are really going to turn the tide and shape the college football playoff race. I think they're going to shake things up a little bit. We'll get into those on Thursday's prediction show. Until then, y'all have a great week, and I will catch y'all on Thursday. Y'all be good. See y'all.